Religion has many victims, and these are the stories of how they survived. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Awakening. I'm your host, Heather.
And I'm your co-host, Tamara, and we appreciate the time and you come into our space for us to hold it for you while you tell your story. Thank you for joining.
We are so excited to be back with you guys again this week. We have a really incredible guest with us. Her name is Adalyn Whitmore, and she is a writer. And she publishes writing on Substack talking about the current condition of the church. And her heart breaks open for what we are seeing unfold right now with Christian nationalism being on the rise. So we are really excited to sit down and chat with her about her story and listen to what it is that's on her heart today. So, welcome in, Adalyn. We are so excited to have you here.
Yes,
Well,
welcome.
thank you. When you've grown up in the church and you've found your voice at a pretty early age, I would say in my early 20s, and me grappling between, should I be more of a quiet woman as the church makes you feel like you should be, or do I just bloom and grow into who God has called me to be? So it doesn't always make me a fan favorite, as the past 10 years have shown, but once my eyes were open to what was going on within the church and the dynamics of Christian nationalism, I could no longer ignore it. And so I've decided I might as well just use my voice because God gave it to me, and I was just going to be me. And those that wanted it and wanted to accept it and apply it to their lives, they can. If not, hey, you know what? I'm in my late 40s. I'm over
Yeah.
caring what people think of me at this point. I just want to love people.
And you know what? I want to say thank you for sharing your voice because that's exactly how I found you, is through you being brave enough to share what it is that's on your heart. What is breaking you open at the moment and the things that you are seeing unfold. And if it wasn't for that, we would have never connected. So
Yep.
I am grateful for that. So we always start our guests off at the very beginning. So, what was your environment like? And you said you grew up in a Christian home. So, what did that look like for your foundation?
I was the typical Appalachia girl and grew up, in poverty. And my dad just chose not to be involved in my life. And my parents were still married, but it just wasn't around. So my mom had to work, and she carried the load of everything, and she was sure to take me to church. And it was Free Will Baptist, so that's kind of what I grew up in for a majority of my younger childhood years. And then we moved out of Appalachia for more opportunities, and it was there that um, we found a non-denominational church. And so in the end, a Pentecostal church wasn't something that was super new to me once I became a young adult, because I used to go to church with my grandmother. She was in the Church of God. And eventually that's where I chose to attend. And I was one of those people that loved our doctrine. I thought, the Church of God was the way to go. And I became involved in church. I would preach and sing and teach adult Sunday school, and that was probably from my early 20s on. And so I knew right away, that God had called me to speak. And not only that, my vocation for years was a teacher. I was an elementary teacher for many years, and now I'm able to stay home with our two kiddos. And so, I've been through the ebbs and flows of church and different denominations. And in my previous life, I was married to someone that was Church of Christ, and you can imagine how Church of Christ and Church of God from Tennessee goes. And
Yeah.
so, I learned then to even have a stronger voice, because my ex mother-in-law and father-in-law didn't like the fact that I was a Pentecostal girl.
Mm.
And so that taught me some things, and that gave me some, as they say, hair on my chest, I guess. But as becoming someone that wasn't afraid to speak up. And I think there's a difference, though, when you do it out of place of love. And trying to be sensitive to who you are as a person, and knowing that there are people that still need to hear what you have to say, and sometimes it's not always comfortable. So, once all that happened, and my divorce came around, I went through a really hard place in my life, and made a bad choice into a new relationship, and it almost destroyed me. And that was when I found my church, and that I was involved in for a number of years, and they loved me back to life. So I know that there's power in community of church. I just haven't been a part of one now for over 6 years. So I know that's a lot packed into it, but that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah.
And so trying to understand who God is, more his love for me, and how I need to love other people, and letting that reshape or deconstruct, as we say often, what it means to be a Christ follower.
Yeah. So, what led you to deconstructing your faith? Was it a slow process? Was it like, when you were in your 20s, like you had conflicting feelings about things? Or was it something later on in life that you started to see the way that other people were behaving or accepting things
I
that
would s-
were absolutely ungodly?
I would say that it was peppered in a little bit, probably in around 2008 or so, which seems forever ago. Um, and I got to the point, I was in a large church of God, absolutely loved the pastor. He was such a phenomenal preacher. And I got to the point where I just could not tolerate the worship. I don't, and I'm a worshiper at heart. When I say I couldn't tolerate the worship, what I meant was I couldn't tolerate the way that the man that was leading worship led it. And it
Gotcha.
just seemed more like production to me. And I
Performance.
just, yes, and I couldn't enjoy it anymore. So I was in the choir, and I decided not to be anymore. But I would get to church right about when I knew the preaching would start, and that was okay with me. And I knew that there were people that probably disagreed with that, because if you're going to church, you go to church, right? You got to be
Yep.
there
For the
before it
whole thing.
starts,
Yep.
when the doors open, when the doors close. And so that was kind of the first glimpse that I had into something was shifting, something was
Yeah.
changing. And so another part of that, let's fast forward a little bit. And this is, I've always loved politics, so I wish I hadn't, but I do. And so here I am. Um, when Obama was elected, I was a Republican, and I was a hardcore Republican.
Me
I'm
too.
talking
Yep.
Rush Limbaugh subscriber, Sean Hannity,
Yep.
Fox News. I did it all. And I was, part of the executive committee, and I knocked on doors. I did parades. I made phone calls, and um, but when Obama was elected, I'll be honest with you, I remember going home feeling such grief in my spirit. Like I truly wept. And at the time, I couldn't process why. It took years for God to reveal to me why I felt that way. But I'm going to be honest with you. I think I thought at the time the reason why I felt that way was because, remember, I'm a Appalachia girl, right? And I
Yeah.
would say that my dad is quite has his own opinions about people of color, and I grew up
Yeah.
hearing that. And so for me, um, I thought maybe that was why I felt so devastated. Because, oh no, we now have our first black president. Oh wow, But now looking back years later, I know why I felt that way is because my spirit knew that it was going to usher in someone like Trump
Yeah.
and forever change the trajectory of the American church. And so to me, that was really when things started to shift, and with COVID
Yep.
was huge. And I
COVID
was
revealed a lot about the church. It really
it really
did
did.
because it showed us how little they cared about their neighbors. because they didn't care about protecting people. They just cared about still meeting and being able to get their tithe money. Like it was crazy how they were willing to sacrifice their entire congregations just to get that offering plate money. Like that was insanity to me. Like I could not understand that, you know?
And and the amount of work that they went through to
Yeah.
make sure tithes and offering was still
Oh
coming
yeah.
into the church.
Oh, yeah, because they started taking up digitally then. That was when they had it posted on their
PayPal's.
website, like, "Just send it
Yeah.
to us any way you can." And my own father was one of these pastors that was like that, like, "How dare the government say we can't meet?" My brother almost died from COVID. So, imagine the cognitive dissonance it takes to be that type of person, right? And then still say that you follow Jesus. The one with the I don't get that. The red letters don't align with that type of behavior, you know? Like,
Yeah. My heart still misses my friend Karen, and we always called her Mama Karen. And she always had asthma issues. And so when COVID hit, and I knew how the church was, and I knew that they were meeting, and I know they weren't going to stop it, and I knew they weren't going to wear a mask. And eventually, Karen got COVID. She contracted it from church camp, and
wow.
her and her father got it, and her husband. Her father passed away from it, and so did Karen. And
Oh,
my last
wow.
picture of her, she sent me one of on the breathing device that she was on, and I remember praying so hard for her to beat this. Um, but I'll be honest, my mind went back to her profile picture on Facebook that said something about being anti-vax,
Wow.
and my heart just felt sad, because
Yep.
we have someone like Karen who trusted the church, right?
Yeah.
And yet it took her life and her father's life,
Yep.
and her left her grandgirls. She just was so crazy about her
Wow.
grandbabies, left them without her. And so many of the girls at our church loved Karen, and she counseled them, and it left them without their mama Karen.
Yeah.
And so, that's a hard thing to think about and to process. um, but there was a big part of why I stopped going to church, and it was not just because of Karen. So
Yeah.
I also noticed that for me during COVID, it really brought to forelight about the way I was raised. If you're sick, you've sinned.
Yep.
And that there was something in your life and there's something that caused it. And I remember looking at people who then started getting COVID one after the other. And I really took to heart that teaching of if you're sick, you've sinned. I'm
Yeah.
like, what are they going to do about this? It's like getting measles or polio or
Yeah.
some kind of like contagious disease that goes across the United States. And it really brought that teachings to light for me. Like, wow, I was
Yeah.
really trained because here
Oh,
I
yeah.
was deconstructed, not a part of the church, just starting to speak out, yet found myself looking at people who received COVID and would have the thought,
Yep.
I wonder
They
what
had
sin is in
sin.
your life.
Yeah. But that's the way that those teachings go. They're so deep and they're
Yeah.
so embedded in your psyche that even years later you can still have those thoughts, you know? So, how did your family respond to you deconstructing if they were all, part of this faith? How have they responded?
well, COVID again was intertwined in this
Yeah,
because um, I was 41 when I had my first baby. And my husband and I have now been married. Will be 11 years in September. And we
Congratulations.
just thank
yeah.
you. So we had IVF, and I had my first one at 41.
That's so
And
cool.
he came 6 weeks early. And on the way to him being born, my mom was in a terrible accident and almost took her life.
Oh,
And
wow.
thank God, here she was in the hospital, and I was in the NICU with Ezra for a week
Oh,
from a
wow.
traumatic birth that I had.
Yeah,
And so, it took us a lot to get our son. And um when COVID came, we couldn't see taking him to church. I mean, he was
Yeah.
not even a year old, and I just wasn't going to subject his lungs. Even now, if he gets pneumonia or something like that, it has such a hold on him. So I wasn't going to take him to church. And so, of course, I was attending a church locally here, and at first they tolerated it. I used to help make the video announcements and stuff like that. And then eventually they're like, well, if you want to continue making the announcements, we need you to come to church. And so I just couldn't do it because not only was COVID around, I was seeing how the church was so nonchalant with it, and felt like if you liked mask, you were wearing a face diaper or you were being controlled by the far left,
Yeah.
and that they were just trying to take the rights of the church away. Not one time have the rights of the church been taken away.
Never.
We have other people's rights that are being
Yep.
impeded now. We know that. Um, but so with all of that, I don't know. I lost the drive, for lack of a better word, to want to attend a brick and mortar church. My
Yeah.
husband was the same way. He grew up Catholic, and you can imagine how that went with my Pentecostal friends. They're not, yeah. It's like if you're a
You're not
Catholic,
allowed
you
to
have
see
no
Christ.
idea what the Holy Spirit is,
Yeah,
and
and what's crazy
Exactly.
is that, and my grandmother did this too because my aunt, the youngest, the baby of the family, she married a Catholic. And at first, my grandmother was not cool with that because, Christians don't view Catholics as Christian, right? So it
Hmm.
took a long time for her to come along. And it's crazy because I had this conversation before, but like it doesn't matter what brand of Christianity you are, there's always going to be somebody that doesn't like the brand that you are. Like it doesn't matter. And it's always wild because it's like, oh, those Baptists, they're not real Christians. My dad said that my whole life. Baptists are not real Christians. Neither were Catholics because we were
I
Church
was,
of God. We were Church of God. We were the only real
yeah.
Christians. But
can I tell
everybody's a
you
real Christian in their own denomination. Like,
exactly? We used to have testimony service, right? And I started out a Baptist. My mom and dad started out a Baptist, and then we became UPC, United Pentecostal. And then when UPC broke because there was women preachers and over television and holiness, then we
mhm.
became Apostolic Pentecostal. But we never identified ourselves as to anything else. And we used to say in testimony service, right? Thank God I was delivered from
From
being a
being a
Baptist,
Baptist.
and thank God I was delivered from being United Pentecostal, UPC, and now I am an Apostolic Pentecostal girl. I mean, that was like a mantra. That's what we
That
like
is
prided ourselves
hilarious.
on.
Thank God for delivering me from being a Baptist. Hallelujah.
Amen.
That
Now
is
I got long hair, no
exactly.
makeup, and jean skirts.
Oh my
Absolutely.
God. And I lived in South Florida and we had to swim in the ocean in jean skirts. And if you know anything about the hems of jean skirts, they fill up with sand. So you have an
Oh
automatic
my
weight
gosh.
down at the bottom
That
of your
is
jean skirt.
crazy. That is crazy. That is insane.
God delivered us for being
Just
UPC
remember,
now.
just remember when you think you got it bad, there's always somebody who had it worse.
Worse.
Thank you for reminding me every show, T. Lord have
Uh,
mercy.
We have to
so
swim with weights on the bottom of our dresses.
Listen,
And
I
you know,
promise you.
we called where we went because we weren't allowed to go with boys and girls, right? It was never allowed to be
Yeah,
commingled.
no commingling.
Our area of the beach was for the youth girls, where it was called the Petticoat Junction
Oh my
because we
God.
had our petticoats hung up over the line before we went
Wow.
swimming.
That's
So
wild.
disgusting.
It's so
But go ahead.
so
anyways.
you were continuing on, like, thinking about how my family reacted to that. And I would say, it was more so my mom. She's very sweet, very meek, humble person.
Yeah.
um and almost to a fault, I felt like, as I was growing up. But um she would make comments like, I really wish that you guys would find a church. I just really think
My
you
mother-in-law used to do that. Yep.
and I said, Mom, I hope you know me enough to know if I felt the pull to do that, I would. I
Yep.
said, I don't right now. And I'm okay with that because in my mind, I was, deconstructing.
Yeah.
And part of that process was finding this amazing little church from Minnesota. It's such a weird thing how it came out. I have a friend of mine named Willow, and she and I had met at my old church up north and became friends on Facebook in a Facebook weird thing. And and so eventually her husband and I became friends because they're singers, right?
Yeah.
And so he started posting on Facebook that they would have live Bible studies during COVID when church was shut
Yeah.
down. So eventually I had messaged him and I was like, thank you all for doing this. You're giving me a place where I can go and feel connected with other people and other believers that kind of see things the way that I do. And that meant a lot to me. And part of that whole process with having those live services was learning the fact that God's love is never ending, and it doesn't matter who you are, what you've done, you're always his and you always will be. There's nothing you can ever do that would ever change that. And so part of that experience with that church in Minnesota was understanding that, and that was
Yeah.
so powerful to me. And I can remember his name is Nate Saban, and he's a phenomenal human. He's a great writer. I think he's on like YouTube and Spotify and other things. So he writes all of his own songs, and his
That's
wife
cool.
sings with him. So they came into my life right when I needed them, and so that changed me too, right? And
Yeah.
so the piece of that began to expose in me the ugly parts of being from the holler in Appalachia, and that was I had some racist tendencies in my heart,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I had to let God show me that, and so part of why I have had the voice that I have, and that I have spoken up and lost friends over the years, is because I'm standing up for people that can't, and
Yes.
people that feel afraid to stand up. I'm still cautious about who I am with my voice because we live in a crazy world and I do have
Yeah.
kiddos. So, I do try to be mindful. Um, but I feel like, I want to see things differently now because of the love of God.
Yeah.
And, my Substack became a place for me to speak about that because I used to be on TikTok, and that's where we
Yeah.
met. And I showed my face and I did lives and I talked about Christian nationalism. And then I just felt like that wasn't safe anymore. So my Substack gave me a place to speak about the merging of politics with church.
Yes.
Yuck.
And we both know we have seen a humongous shift in the church um with the first Donald Trump presidency, and it was crazy to me that the church voted for him the first time. And it was even more insane that they voted for him a second time, knowing that he had 34 felonies, knowing about the insurrection, knowing about the Epstein files, knowing about the rape of E. Jean Carroll. Like, for me, it was like that was the nail in the coffin for me with my relationship with religious institutions, because for I cannot personally align myself with the institution knowing the centuries, because people say, oh, this is just now happening now. No, centuries this has been happening, because this faith continues to get hijacked by political power, and they continue to do violent things like the crusade. They killed thousands of people, and here we're repeating the same racist things. Like, we are literally seeing the techniques and tactics that Hitler used step by step, like play by play. And this is the Jesus party. So, but there is no Jesus in that. And I always think about that because, I'm not a believer like I was before. I consider myself agnostic now. But if I was to still believe in Jesus, I would believe that he sets all the captives free. He sets everybody free. And just like you said, he loves everybody. There is not a person on the face of this earth that Jesus did not love, right? So if you are a person of faith and you're not leading with love, compassion, empathy, mercy, grace, I don't want anything to do with you. If you're leading with judgment and condemnation and you're just wanting to hurt other people that don't look like you, that don't think like you, that don't believe like you are the one that is the problem. Like, and I don't understand how people like my own father, that has preached the gospel his entire life, could get sucked so far down into this rabbit hole that now he preaches completely against the very teachings that he taught me growing up. That, this was the man that taught me how to love my neighbors, taught me to die loving my neighbors. Like somebody's going to come kill you someday for believing in this. And then here's this same man that has literally completely turned his back on that. And he's okay with saying people like me deserve to just die, you know? And
Can I can I
go ahead.
interject just for a
Yeah.
minute? I find it's funny. I was listening to a history on Thomas Jefferson. There's a really good thing out there on YouTube. But do you know our country has had these issues since George Washington and the Thomas Jefferson struggled with the fact that Christianity was not going to be separate, and he fought that with
Yeah.
our founding fathers. And
Yep.
there was this huge divide because he was more of a um, atheist type of belief system,
Mm-hmm.
if you know what I'm saying, that he believed that Christianity was for religion, it was for religion and from religion. And the
Yes.
people even back then, when our country was first developing, had a very hard time with going along with Thomas Jefferson and the way that it all conflicted with even writing the Constitution of these
Yep.
United States. I was just watching it this morning and I was just amazed that from the beginning of our history,
Oh, yeah.
250 years ago, we have struggled with, as a nation, for religion and from religion, and
Yes.
keeping church and state separate, which just makes it even that much more profound in today's society, right? Because you're realizing, wow, they never thought. Thomas Jefferson was a staunch believer on separation of
Yeah.
church and state, but some of our other forefathers wanted it very much
Oh,
apart.
yeah.
And I was raised believing that all of our founding fathers were
Me too.
Christians
Me
and we
too.
were a Christian nation.
Yep.
And to see the opposition, even back then, makes you realize how long
Yeah.
we have been
Been
struggling with Christian nationalism
nationalism. Yes.
without
And
even knowing it.
it
So,
makes you realize how men have used religion to
yes.
gain power
Yes.
and to subdue women. And
Mhm.
and so that's all part of my deconstructing too. And
Yes.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's been a
Mm.
very hard thing for me too, Adeline, is because a lot of times I say that I didn't have a problem. I'm an atheist, okay? I'm an anti-theist. But I was raised Christian nationalist. I belonged to a cult. I was raised in a cult mentality. Um, and it's always interesting to me for me to see the progression of how I've evolved into who I am and what I am today. And some of the biggest things is that I don't struggle with heaven and hell. I don't struggle with an afterlife. I don't struggle with angels and with demons and with devils. Those kind of things have never even come really into my brain for deconstructing. It was kind of like, that doesn't make sense. And I was done. Right. But the indoctrination, the police toning of my
Yep.
voice, the way I talk, Heather and I will do sometimes, we're like, let's do our fundy
Let's do
voices,
our
right?
funny
And
voices.
they were like, hi, how are you today? Because we were taught to take our voices from the way they are
Yep.
and go submissive
Talk
and
like a
say, God
lady.
bless you. We're so glad to have you in church today. And we
How
don't
are you
even
today?
realize that we
Blessed and
were
highly favored.
trained.
God is good all the time,
All the
And all the
time, God
time,
is
God is
good.
good. But we're taught to say it in a tone policed
Yep.
voice if we are a meek and a mild and a Proverbs 31 woman. And those are the things that have been very difficult for me to reclaim as I deconstructed, because I needed to be able to find my voice without thinking that I was going to offend somebody else. And then today I saw a video that a friend sent me, and I always talk with my hands, right? My hands are
Yeah.
always moving and talking. And on this video it said that women were taught not to talk with their hands. And I remember doing this,
Oh, yes. I still will like
pulling it in
or
front of
I'll
me
hold my hands like into myself. Yep.
before I talk. And I realize that I do that with men that I feel are of authority and power
Oh,
to this
wow.
day. Or I apologize. I'm like, I'm so sorry I was talking with my hands.
Oh my
And I
goodness.
didn't realize until today that the
That was a
reason why I was
patriarchy.
apologizing was not because that what I was doing was wrong,
Yeah.
but I was indoctrinated to make sure my hands stayed in front of me so I didn't distract the men that were talking to me.
And
and
that's wild.
I hear that now, and it makes me
Yeah.
just think that, to me, that's really looking in the mirror and saying, God, I don't really like how you made me, and so I just got to be how they want me.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's something I'm trying to still get over in moments.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I don't live my life for other people.
Mm-mm.
Um, but I
No.
do want to be somebody that they can feel love from and know that
Right.
there is a God that loves them, you know.
Yes.
And I think that's where I'm at now. I don't understand the dynamics of the Bible and how it was written. Do I think that everything in the Bible is God breathed? Probably not, no, just because humans are like that, right? They do
Yeah.
things to suit themselves, what they want.
Yep.
And so that makes me believe that women aren't to be seen as the church has made us believe, and
Right.
Yes.
that we're all God's, and that he loves us, and that I still think that there is something that had to have created all of this. So while I may not understand it all, while I don't understand my Uncle Benny wasn't healed of cancer, and he wanted to be healed so he could pastor his church. I mean, what's wrong with that? And so on, right? There are things that I don't understand, but I know in my life that he is a force that has been with me, and I'll continue to go with him. Um, but it don't mean that I'm going to be going to church now. I have recently been going some with my mom. She has a Parkinson's diagnosis, so I want to be there for her more, and I want my kids to, be able to be there with her. And so, and if there's ever a time that I hear something that I don't like, I'm out.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where I'm at. And I told her, I said,
Yeah.
I'm not going to go to church to hear politics preached from the pulpit. I'm just not. I won't do it.
Yep.
And so far, knock on wood, it hasn't happened. So here I am.
And
Yeah.
in all honesty, today, right? Even if I was a Christian woman, all right, I'm saying just me being a woman. When I go into churches and I hear that it becomes a political platform
Yep.
for them to promote and push whatever it is that they're wanting to get voted on in that election, whether it's local, state, county-wide. I have a difficult time, and I have asked pastors, why are you bringing politics to the
Yeah.
house of
It
God?
doesn't belong in the
Why?
pulpit.
They
It
don't
never
belong
does.
together,
Nope.
because now you become a mouthpiece for exactly what it is that you want the church to vote for. And
Yeah.
that is way too much control for one man of a church to be able to overlook, you
And
know,
Why would you
10,000 people if you're in a MAGA
Yeah.
church.
And not just that, why would you ever want to put Jesus in bed with the same people that he was executed by? Like, that is so stupid because that's
Yeah.
exactly what you're doing. Every time you align Christ with a political party, you are literally putting him in bed with the same people that nailed him on that cross. And I will never understand that because they're the same people that are crucifying him today. They're crucifying every time they attack brown people. Every single time they're crucifying Christ over again because he was a brown skinned Middle Eastern refugee. And every time they go after one of our brown skinned neighbors, they are going after Christ. Every time they mock a poor person, they are mocking the gospel of Christ. Every time they mock a queer person, especially a queer person that has been rejected over and over and over and over again, they are mocking the very image of God. And they're too dumb to even see it. They're too stubborn, too hard hearted to even see the image of God when it's standing before them. And trans people, I always think they are such a beautiful people because you literally can walk beside them through their transition. And if you've ever seen a trans person transition and had the wonderful opportunity of being able to walk with them side by side, it is such a powerful spiritual experience if you are willing to meet them where they're at, because that trans person is going to teach you things about yourself that you never even knew because they know themselves better than you ever could. And it is such a
Can the
beautiful
church
thing.
say amen?
Well,
See, this is
and
why I used to be a preacher. I'm sorry.
I know, that's what I'm saying. It's
She's
like,
got me preaching on this podcast. Oh
woo,
no.
I
take
come
up
to
an
Sunday
offering.
church and it's like,
Um,
oh, here we go. Let the church say amen.
Amen. Well, and I'm listening to that, and I know this is just a rhetorical question, but how many times did Jesus use the government to accomplish God's
Never.
will? Not
Nope.
one time.
Nope.
And so along with that comes the fact that nothing we could ever do could separate us from the love of God.
Yep.
And if we claim to be a Christian nation, if we claim to love God, if we claim the Bible, then the core of that message is love.
Yes.
We all know John 3:16, for God so
Yes.
loved the world that he gave his only
Only
son.
son.
And
Exactly.
it was one time, once and for
Yes.
all, and that's
Once
biblical
and for
too.
all. Amen.
And so, if we truly want to make a change in the United States of America, we're not going to do it through Pete Hegseth. We're
No.
not going to do it through Pam Bondi. We're
No.
not going to do it through JD Vance. And
No.
the sooner that those in the church can understand that,
Yeah.
the better that we're going to be as a nation, and that they are going to actually walk in a position of love instead of authority. And that's a
Yes.
whole different thing. And I think,
Yes, because Jesus washed feet, and that's the thing. The church has got itself in a place where it holds itself above everybody else. And until they get themselves on that same level where they can wash the feet of all those people they like to mock, ridicule, judge, shame, they won't have it, you know? It comes with being humble. It comes with being meek, but not in a meekness that demands your silence in the face of suffering, because it's not the same.
you know, I think about all that took place over the past 20 years or so that got the church to a place they would support someone like Trump.
Yeah.
And we know that part of that is abortion and
Yes.
Jerry Falwell. We know that part of that is how they have talked about those with that are part of the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
And so those are the two things that I feel like those little puppeteers somewhere, whoever they are, use to dangle in front of people to support the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And so that's a hard thing to witness and to see when, like me, I'm sure you all too, were raised up and don't drink, don't smoke, don't chew, and
Yes.
don't go with those
Yeah.
that do.
Yeah.
And so part of that was this holiness. Without holiness, no man will see the Lord. I'm sure
Yeah.
y'all were probably in
Yes.
your church at some point
But all
going
that
around praying
became
the
was,
demons out.
but what they did is
We
they
were
took
laying our hands
holiness.
on.
Yeah, but they took holiness and turned it into policing everybody's behavior, what they wear, what they can and can't do. And before you know it, Holiness is about putting people in a box and restricting them from everything that makes them human, but ignoring everything that actually is affecting humanity, which is
But
suffering.
but do you know that's not taught in the churches? Holiness is next to godliness.
Yes.
That is what matters. I
Yeah.
don't ever remember I was taught the Bible, but I wasn't
Yeah.
taught anything about humanity. If you did
No.
not belong to our church, you did not belong in the
Yes.
in God's army. You were not a part of. If you were not a part of the Apostolic Pentecostal Church, you had to be a part of God's
Yeah.
army. You had to be a participant. So for
It's
me, it was
crazy.
always like holiness and godliness was the only thing that I wanted to achieve to or aspire by. I
Yeah.
had no idea that there was humanity in the world, that there was caring for the LGBTQIA community, for marginal communities. I didn't even know what that was because I
Yeah.
was so in a box, like Heather said, that it was a struggle once I left. And I realized that that's how we were taught to treat others
Yeah.
You know,
outside of my holiness church.
and they talk so much about being a martyr. I've heard so
Oh,
much of
yes.
those teachings in my life, and how, the left and the world was coming for the
Mhm.
church, and they were
Yep.
keeping you out of church, and they were going to take away the right, and and all that. And I just
We've
I
been,
just
under persecution for decades. Like we just Christians are always persecuted, which is wild to me because they literally just did this, 240, 260, I don't even know what it was called, 250 prayer thing. And I'm like,
oh
no, what you're doing is you're mocking Christ in front of the entire world. And you wonder why people constantly critique you. And it's because the fruit that you produce looks nothing like the fruit that Jesus produced. You
and it lacks the accountability of it, Heather.
Yeah, they have no
Oh,
accountability. They talk about things
never.
that Jesus never really freaking talked about because when you hear them talk, they're not talking about feeding the hungry. They're not talking about healing the sick anymore. They're not talking about that. They're talking about politics. They're talking about everything that doesn't matter, everything that gives them permission to write everybody off. And it's so messed up how twisted and how far we have gotten from that message of love. And I was just like you, like when I first, left the church, learning about that love, like being able to love myself, because I didn't know how. Like I really did not know how to love myself. And
I
I
still
think a
don't.
lot of Christians, they don't know how to love their neighbors because they don't know how to love themselves. They have been conditioned that loving themselves is wrong, evil, sinful. So they don't know how to show up for themselves in a healthy way. And because of that, they don't even know how to show up for their neighbor in a healthy way. And the only way that they know how to make themselves feel better is to judge their neighbors, is to write them off, to be like, oh my God, my life ain't so bad. At least I don't drink every weekend. And now
But
I'm sitting here thinking, have you seen the world? I can understand why people drink every weekend. I'm just saying, like, people got trauma out here.
And if you drink every weekend, I've had to deconstruct. Is there really something wrong with that? I'm in my house. I have a glass of wine or two
Exactly.
glasses of
Like,
wine. I'm not doing anything wrong. Why was I taught that I'm
yeah.
going to hell because
Going
I
to hell
participated
because
in a
you
glass
had a
of
couple
wine?
of drinks. Like, it's so stupid. But it's like, that's what it was about. It was always
Yeah.
about policing everything that didn't matter. But we
Mhm.
never focused on the things that really did.
Never.
And I think that was one of the things that really did break my heart. And when I opened, my eyes were open to that. And not just the things that they don't do, but the things that they do, like covering up all the child sexual abuse. They don't ever talk about it. They're never talking about it. They have child SA insurance that these institutions carry so they can cover a lawsuit when it comes. That's how much they don't care about it. They would rather carry insurance than to have hard conversations with their staff instead of putting in more protective measures so these things don't happen where adults are never alone with children. They would rather just carry SA insurance. And I
and you
think
think
that is
Or
about
such a big problem in the house of God. The
and
house of
if you
God
think
should.
about it, whatever they know that it's happened and there's proof, because usually the pastors are the first ones
Yep.
they come to confess their sins, right?
Yep.
But if the pastors would set a precedence in their church
Yep.
and say, you may be forgiven, but it needs to be outside these four walls.
Yeah, exactly. You cannot come back here. No
You are
more. You're
not
done.
welcome
Yep.
here. The pastors make too much provision for people who have been forgiven,
Yep.
and then they commit the crimes over and over and over again. And most ministers are not bound by law to have to
No.
testify
No, and churches are
what they've
not
been told.
mandatory reporters. They're not
That's what
mandatory
I'm saying.
reporters. And,
That
it's
blows my mind.
I was telling you this story earlier. This man had SA'd or raped 12 different women, and his church mourned the loss of him when they asked him to step down from leadership because of this. And they didn't even get rid of him because of the rape. It was because they had told him that he wasn't allowed to operate in ministry anymore. And he had signed a check that he had received from a congregant for tithe. And because they had revoked his license at that point, they actually removed him from the church because he had signed that check even though he wasn't a licensed pastor. It had nothing
Because
to
of the
do with the
acts.
rape. It had
So,
everything to do with the fraud. So that's why they removed him from the church, was the fraud. The rape wasn't enough.
so why
And
do you
this
think
is
it
why
is
I
then,
hate this.
Heather? Why do you think it is then that you think about them excusing all of that with Trump and the
Yeah,
sexual crimes, and then you have someone like me who was such a part of this body of church that I used to be
yeah,
part of, and when I started saying I don't want my children to become my sons to
yep,
become be like Trump, and all of a
yeah.
sudden I'm unfollowed.
Yes,
They're not my friend anymore.
yes,
Right? Like,
yes.
so why is it I'm held to a different account
Yep.
and they're excusing all of
Oh,
that
yeah,
behavior?
exactly.
I
And,
don't know why it's excused. I for the life of me in 2026,
yeah,
I don't understand
I will
why
never
it's
understand it.
permitted, condoned, groomed,
And it's
and
not
still
just
allowed.
And it's not like this one instance, okay? Because
No,
we see this day after day, week after week. Like we have Robert Morris running around out here, did 6 months, 6 months in jail. But there is a black man that's in prison right now for marijuana, and he's been there for over 20 years. This man raped a child, and he only did six
six
months
months.
because he's a white man. But the black man, he's still in prison for weed, and he's been there for over 20 years. Don't tell me the system ain't swayed. It is so screwed up. And this is the stuff that enrages me because the church is silent. They are silent. And we are talking
Yeah.
about babies being hurt. We are talking about children being traumatized with purity culture teachings because this is rape culture that they're bringing these kids up in.
And
There
the thing
is,
about it
you
is
know,
that even if you spend 6 months in prison, you're going right back to a church house
yeah,
that has forgiven
he's
you
already
and
preaching.
will put you back up on the
Yep.
platform and
He's from
platform
Robert
you.
Morris. He's already
Yeah.
preaching.
And when you say this is wrong, it's like, well, God forgave him. It's not for me to
Yeah.
judge. Yes, it is for me to judge. That's my
Yeah.
baby who don't have a voice.
Yep.
That's your babies that don't have a voice. Those are your women
Exactly.
that are sitting in Turning Point and women
And they're
shelters
putting their
that are
heads down.
claiming that they're
Yep.
Christians, and they're begging God to help them and forgive them
And
and to
rescue
put
them.
them and rescue them
Yeah.
while they sit in shelters, and the men who put them in the shelters are still in church Sunday morning.
Yep.
Of course they are. And I think that that's part of the design that's been going on
Hmm.
for the past
Yes.
20, 30 years is
Exactly.
what they've
Yes.
done to women. And I have a little excerpt from something that I wrote on Substack, and if you don't mind, I was just going
No,
to read
sure.
kind of about this.
Go
It
ahead.
says,
Absolutely.
here's what nobody wants to say out loud. The qualities that have been used for centuries to subdue women, what are they? Their strength, conviction, moral courage. Those are exactly what's missing in men right now. And our culture has
Mm.
gotten so comfortable with that absence that it's basically handed men a free pass. Oh,
Yes.
you're not leading, you're not protecting, you're not living out what God designed you for. That's fine because look at those women over there being too much. No, that's not a reason. That's a deflection. And the church has let it slide for way too long. Hmm.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
and so
Spot
I,
on
I
there, girlfriend.
I
Spot
just
on.
think that I am here for a reason. And I heard so many times in my life that, there's what is there's a purpose for everything under heaven, or
Yes.
for such a time as this,
Yes.
and it all goes back to me questioning myself, questioning,
Mhm.
Yes.
um, my grit, questioning my ability and desire to have wisdom. I think
Yeah.
that God gives me to share with people, and so that's a hard thing, right?
Yeah.
Because they purposely try to subdue women who
Yes.
they say are too emotional to
And
lead.
women that have that in their mindset, they don't even want to take you seriously because who are you to talk to me? You're not a man. You're not a
Mhm.
person of authority that I should listen to, which is just crazy. But so we're
But they
winding
allow it
down
to
here.
happen, Heather.
Mhm.
They do it.
Yeah.
What they'll say is that, and I always say that women are part of the problem because they promote and protect patriarchy. They
Yes.
promote and protect these women, these men that
Men.
do this.
Yep.
And I feel honestly that women who protect harmful men look at those men as powerful men, and in return feel that those men will protect them in return. So they
Yep.
gravitate
Yep.
towards that
Yep.
because they benefit. We
Yes.
as females benefited from marrying the leaders of our youth
Yes.
group, the preachers of our churches,
The
the ones
worship
who had
leader.
voice, worship leaders. We all strive to be one of those wives because power protects us,
And we wanted to
and
be
we
the
don't
smoking hot
feel that
wife.
power. Yeah, and we don't feel like we can give that power. I say to this day sometimes, men, if men would stand up against men in patriarchy, men listen to men. Men are not going to listen to me if
No.
I continuously
Yeah.
say, stop. That's
Yeah.
patriarchy. That's misogyny. That's sexual harassment. That is not holding women's
Yep.
places and spaces to be a safe person. And they're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm a man of God. Okay.
But I
Yeah.
think with that comes a realization of I wrote a song today. I'm still working on it, but I sent it to you, Heather, and it's um on my Substack. And there's two, so I need to post the other one. But this is really about David and King Saul and Nathan. And I began to just listen and remember. I was always intrigued by that story. And I believe that, God is calling women like myself and women that are embracing the voices that God has given them and the fire within. He's calling us to be a Nathan. And
Yep.
and that means speaking the uncomfortable truth, and that's what
Yes.
Nathan had to do to David, because David cared. He didn't want David to become a Saul.
Yeah.
And I wrote in this piece, I said, so if a Nathan comes your way with a fire of Peter in their eyes and a grief in their voice, do not harden your heart. That person risked the relationship to speak to you, not because they hate you, but because you still matter to God. And I think that that's where we have to get. And when we make a choice to speak to people and
Yeah.
stand up for what we see, who God really is, and that's a loving
Yep.
God who created every single one of us, and there's nothing we can do to make him change that. Your children will forever be your children.
Yep.
Nothing they can ever do, Heather, will make them not biologically yours. You will
Yep.
never not be their mother. And that's the kind of God that I believe, we are to
Yes.
embrace and love.
Yes.
Now, do I believe he gives us boundaries? And do I believe that he has certain things and ways that he wants us to live out? And yes, and it's one word, and it's
It's
love.
love. That's it.
And
That
and
is
so
it.
if we
Yes.
think on that, if we think about the love that he has for us, then I can't, it took me so many years to have a child, so many years. I was a teacher and I could love kids, other people's kids, and I had that. And I was a
Yeah.
stepmom before I had my own, which is a whole different dynamic. But, once I became a mother, I understood more deeply what it means to
Yeah.
be a parent and to love something more
So
than
powerfully.
yourself,
Yes.
right? And want things for them. And I want to um have my kids to grow up feeling loved. Does it mean they're sheltered? I don't know. If they are, they are.
It's
But it's a
okay.
hard world, and I want them to grow up feeling loved. And so I don't want to raise kids that have to have therapy because of me.
Yeah.
Now, will they at some point? I don't know. Only God knows. But, I want them to know that mom loves you and you can always come to me, even when you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
I'm here for you and you'll always be mine. And I think that's where we have to get as
Yeah.
a church, because you know what they want to say, the world just coming in,
Yeah. Oh,
everybody
yeah.
just creeping in, and they're trying to
Yep.
hold us back, and people just want what the world's got. And it's not that.
We want
It's not
Yeah.
love.
that
That's
at
all
all.
we want is
Yes.
you to love people. Like,
And
we don't want to go to hell
Yes.
in a handbasket. We want more
and
love.
And if I could say this, when I first left the cult and I moved to Michigan 5 years ago, when I started doing the podcast and stuff, I did it with a podcast with men that I absolutely to this day love. It was called Help My Unbelief. They're a Christian group from Oklahoma, and pretty phenomenal men, just good men. They're Christian men, but they're good men. And I remember telling them on their podcast, I was this 27-year-old girl with three babies, one deathly ill with no immune system. And I moved halfway across the country. And I remember going back into churches and realizing that if one person would have shown me love, I'd have stayed.
Yeah.
But
Yep.
instead, when I walked into different denominations and they saw me as a single mom with three kids,
All you got was
the
judgment.
questions that they asked me were were harsh. It was cold. It was cruel. Um, and you thought you were going to find a church family, right? And I often said, if back then, when I was so young and had left the church, and people knew that I had left a cult, that what I found that churches lacked were unconditional love.
Yeah.
That I didn't walk in as a married woman with a daddy over my three kids. I walked in with three babies, and we were all struggling because of trauma issues. And I never forget realizing that I didn't find unconditional love. I moved from Florida to Michigan. I packed my stuff overnight. Nobody knew I was leaving. I left family, I left friends, I left foundation. And when I came to other churches, I was scorned. I was shunned because I was a single mom.
Yeah.
I was a poor single mom. I didn't have a dime. I didn't have a nickel. I just left. And I often say that it's like, if I see people, why can't they love me
Yeah.
unconditionally? Because that's what God taught.
Yeah.
And I found myself being disconnected from churches. And probably the reason why I'm an anti-theist today wasn't that I was wanting to start out that way, but
Yeah.
I just never could find unconditional love within inside the four walls of a church.
I don't think you can get power that way. I don't
Yeah.
think you can get political power if that's your mindset, right?
Exactly.
So so when you come in and you are living a real life, and I remember so long we used to say the church is a hospital,
Yes. Yep.
right?
Yes.
Should be a
Yes.
hospital.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but if you come in and you're bleeding out,
We can't help you.
sorry,
We can't help you. It's too
too
much.
messy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or you
And
have
and
a pastor
I wouldn't
trying to
tell
help.
anybody my story.
Yeah.
When I moved up here and I started going to churches, they would ask me, "Do you have? Who are you? How are you? What are you about?" I would say I was a single. I was a single. I was an only child, and my parents died, and they believed me. So I walked around like living this life for like almost 15 years before I started
Yeah.
actually telling my story on TikTok because
Yeah.
people didn't want to hear that you left
Yeah.
you packed your kids and left a domestic violence. They don't want to hear that you were raised
They
in a
don't
cult. They
have
don't
the
want to hear that you're a
capacity.
Christian
Yep.
nationalist. They're
They
like,
don't have the capacity to
oh,
hold space
back
for
up.
it. So, we always ask everybody when we're getting close to the end of the show, if you were wanting to, give a few words to somebody who is just now
Yes.
starting their deconstruction journey, what would you offer for them, honey?
Well, I want to share first off again something that I wrote because I feel like it's really important, and it's
Okay.
about being the opposition, and that's
Okay.
what you are when you're deconstructing, right?
Yes.
Right.
Being the opposition doesn't mean you're wrong. It doesn't mean you're right entirely either. That humility is what sets us apart. It doesn't mean you're driven by hate. It means you're courageous enough to speak truth into hard spaces. It doesn't mean facts have lost their value. They matter then and they matter now and they always will. It doesn't mean you'll gain more friends or keep the ones you love. Standing firm can be a lonely calling. And that's what I'm learning about deconstruction is that for the most part it is a lonely calling.
It is.
And it's losing the friends. It's losing the pastor off your Facebook page. It's losing, one of the deacons of my church where I was so close with his daughter and was part of our wedding,
Yeah.
because I said I don't want my son to be like Donald Trump, right?
Yeah.
So there is loneliness in that. And then obviously, having to stop attending church when my baby was small because of COVID and wanting to protect him, and then seeing the dynamics of Christian nationalism that just didn't sit right with me. And my mama didn't
Yeah.
raise no fool. So,
Yes.
Right.
I want to just say to people, it can be a lonely calling, but there is such a deeper and richer experience in here
Yeah.
that you can have when you choose to deconstruct. You and I can remember my husband telling me, he was like, honey, let me tell you something. So and so, this pastor's assistant, right? He could not walk the walk you've had to walk over the past 10 years
Yeah.
because you've had to stand on your own, just you and
Yes.
God. And so there is a calling in that, and there is a grace in that, and there is a mercy and a love that makes us eventually quit looking here and look up. And
Yeah.
that's saying, I don't want me, right? We always used to say, less of me and more of you, God, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so if we can fall into not understanding that we can backslide and that we're constantly in limbo with our
Yes.
relationship with God, if I don't go
Yeah.
to church, I'm backslidden, right?
Right.
We
Yes.
and if we can understand that that's not who God is, that He just
Hmm.
wants us to love. The greatest
Yes.
of these is
Is
love.
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 So if you're
Yes.
deconstructing, love.
Yes. That's it.
And I've
It's
always said
literally
this.
that.
I always said love wins.
Yes.
Love
And
wins.
and the reality
It's not
is
hard.
you have to start with loving yourself.
Yourself.
And I know that sounds so crazy because in religious spaces you are taught that it's a sin. But the reality is it starts with us. It starts with being compassionate towards ourselves, not telling ourselves that we're rotten or we're useless or oh my god, you're so stupid. Why did you do that again? Because that's just continuing to beat us down, right? So we have to be gentle with ourselves. We have to be compassionate towards ourselves. Because I think once we learn how to really do that, we really can love people better. We can meet them where they are, no matter where they're at, and be like, dude, I can still see your humanity. Like, you
Right.
may be a complete train wreck right now, but I can still see your humanity because when I see somebody that's a strung out addict, like I know Christian people would just be like, they're just a waste of space. Why
They're
are we wasting
somebody's
money on these
baby.
people? Right. But when I see them, I see a person that is traumatized and they are doing everything they can to survive with whatever trauma they have endured in their life. That's why people get hooked
Mhm.
on drugs, right?
That person
Like,
was somebody's baby. That
That's
was
yes.
some
that's what
mama's
I just
baby.
But
said.
That's what I think.
yeah. And
Yeah,
everybody has value.
because when
Yeah.
they started out on this journey of life,
Yeah.
their dreams and aspirations were not to
Yep.
be an addict.
Yeah. Like,
I've
and
not met one addict that thought, when I grow up, I'm going to be an
yeah.
addict.
Like, I
That's
am
not
not
how
the
their story
person that is
started.
ever going to see somebody that's, strung out on the street corner, tweaking out and taking a video of that and then putting it on social
Uh,
media. Because
That is
why would you wanna
disgusting.
publicly humiliate somebody that is traumatized and living the worst reality possible right now, and then humiliate them on top of that? That's
And then your
never gonna
family
wanna
sees
make an
them
addict get
random.
clean. Like, it's so gross to me to exploit people that are going through horrible things like that.
You
So
know, it
I
makes me think about I was talking about Saul and David, and I think,
yeah.
Heather, the big piece of that is empathy, which we know that
Yes.
the far right has really sucked dry out of
Yes.
people. But without empathy, we become this Saul David refused to become. And I think that's what I want to tell myself. You know, I don't
Yes.
understand. Do I feel uncomfortable if, I mean, let's be honest, if would I feel uncomfortable if I was by myself and I went into a space where there are a lot of people that were a different color than me? Yeah, I probably would.
Yeah.
But at the same time, wouldn't they be feel the same way?
Yeah.
Right? So it's learning to understand, hey, people feel that way too.
Yeah.
It's not just
Yeah.
because I'm white, right?
Yeah.
And so it's understanding there's a difference there, and it's having the empathy that God is calling us to have. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, when you
And
dumb
not
that
getting
down,
And not getting offended
yeah,
at everything, right? Because that's another thing is like, we were always offended if somebody ever challenged us on what we were taught to believe, right? And
that's
Christians hold that
true.
so tightly that they take offense to everything. And it's like, this is an opportunity to call you into deeper relationship with somebody else. And I want people to
Wow.
understand this. Whenever somebody is coming to you and they're saying, hey, could you maybe possibly not do that anymore because it's hurting me? That is an opportunity for you to get closer to them and go deeper in your relationship with them because they're telling you right here, I want you to love me better, and this is exactly how you can do it. The church never taught us to pay attention to those things on how we can love people better. I guarantee you, Tamara over here, she's one of my best friends, right? She's like a sister to me. So if I did something that was offensive to her, she's going to freaking let me know. But I want to know. And people that are in community with me know if I say something that I'm not supposed to, please call me on that crap immediately. I want to know if I've
Immediately.
hurt you, offended you, whatever. But when I was in religious spaces, you couldn't check me on anything. I would have gotten angry. I would have gotten
I would have
defensive
said, you can take
immediately.
that to Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, bless your heart, you know.
But I
I
just
remember
want
getting in
to
arguments with girlfriends in the youth group, and
yes,
they would be like, blah, 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 blah. You know how girls are, right? And I was like, well, you can always take it to
take it
Jesus.
to Jesus.
Let's go pray. But I want to say this, Adeline, thank you for saying what you did, because
Yes.
I'm going to tell you back in the beginning of my journey, right, of deconstructing, if there was somebody in my life like Heather, or if there was somebody in my life like you, my journey today would have looked different.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's other women that are just starting this
And I
journey
really
and
believe that,
don't want to find their, because I believe I came to a fork in the road and I know
yeah.
exactly where it was. And I went one way,
Yeah.
and all my Christian beliefs and upbringings and my godliness and holiness were left right there at that fork in the road.
Yep.
But I know that there is important for other people who are walking this walk, to
Yes.
know that there are people out here that deconstructed their childhood God and still
And are still
find
speaking
compassion
truth.
and empathy
Yeah.
and love for the other person. And when you go to them or go into their churches, you're going to find women like this,
Yeah.
like the two that I'm sitting on a panel with.
Yeah.
And I have to say, I appreciate that because I feel it's so important. It's not just important that I deconstructed and became an anti-theist.
Yeah.
I understand my reasons why, but it's important for those that are coming behind me to know that there are still beacons of light if they want to
Yeah.
maintain their faith.
And
So
not
thank
just
you.
that, if you are, you have family members, you have deconstructed, don't lose hope. Because
Yeah.
all three of us, we all came from super religious backgrounds, super religious families, and we were still able to see the truth amidst all the darkness. Okay. So don't lose hope. Keep trying. If you
Yes.
still have connection with that family member that you still love, still trying to speak truth into their life. do everything that you can to just love them where they're at. I know so many of us, we've had to
Love
sever
that.
ties for our own safety,
Yeah.
and our own protection. And that's okay too. That is completely
Yes.
valid, completely reasonable. But if it is somebody that, you're still connected with, continue to share with them what's on your heart. Don't change who you
Mm,
are for anybody, because it's through sharing these things that we do help other people. And I really believe that we all have our different spaces. And I've said this before, but we all function differently in the deconstruction community. There are spaces just like yours for people that are just now coming out looking for some kind of guidance. And it is so awesome that you get to be one of those people to help tell
mm,
them, hey, you're not freaking out. You are not abnormal by thinking these things. Because when I first deconstructed, I've said this many times, we didn't have all these spaces. There wasn't all this stuff out there. Like, I was blown away when I found the new evangelicals, because I was like, oh my God, there's actually people out here that think like this. I started crying. I sat and cried for 30 minutes after finding them, because I had been so alone on this journey, like so alone. So
You
thank
know,
you.
thank
Thank you
you.
for being brave. Thank you for
Well,
being brave.
and I think this is very powerful. If I could just say this really quick, we have an agnostic and
Yes.
love wins. We
Yes.
have an atheist and love wins. And we have a
A Christian
Christian and
and
love
love
wins.
wins.
And the one thing about us is that I never allowed me be an atheist to make me
No.
bitter or harsh.
Yeah.
Love wins.
Yes.
It has
And
won the
and
day I
and
started my deconstructing journey. And
yeah.
if people could see three different paths right here in this
Yeah.
podcast today, and at the end of the day, compassion, empathy,
See,
and
and
love.
love. And the most beautiful thing is that, 10 years ago I wouldn't even have sat next to an atheist. I would
me
have
either.
never, God, I wouldn't even have said I was agnostic. Are you serious? Like, I'd have thought I've been set alive, burning on fire
Heather loves me
immediately.
like her bestie friend, and she just admitted I'd have had nothing to do with you 10
I
years
wouldn't
ago.
have, because she was an atheist. I'd have thought I was going to hell by even
Yeah.
having a relationship with her. Because what business does light have with darkness? Like,
But
I would have felt convicted by just talking to her. Or it's crazy, isn't it? It's so crazy. Don't be that
well,
way. Love
no.
everybody.
And so I guess if I had one other thing to throw in, sorry, I would talk about how this is something in a piece that I wrote about David and Saul, and I talked about how the temptation is not only a political temptation to harden your heart, to harden who you are. It's a human one. Every one of us has felt the slow pull toward self protection, toward
Yeah.
surrounding ourselves with the only voices that confirm what we already believe, toward shutting the door when a Nathan knocks. So, we can't do that to ourselves,
Yeah.
and we can't let ourselves harden, because that's what I wanted to do sometimes when
Yeah.
I've had people unfollow me because I don't support Trump anymore, right? That was hurtful. And
Yeah.
I had to make a choice to not let it harden me, because I want to think that's what differentiates us, right?
Yeah, it
If they
does.
came to me and said, "Hey, Adeline, thank you so much for taking the stand. I may not always liked it, and I'm sorry that I unfollowed you." And I'm like, hey, it's okay. All water under the bridge. Love you. Let's go. Right?
Yep.
That's just where I would be.
Yeah.
And so it's a difference. When you finally get to that place and you don't let
Mhm.
that hardness
Yeah.
get to you, and you realize because of that you now have an obligation, I think, to be a Nathan, to speak the truth in the hard places.
So listen to Adalyn and be a Nathan, you guys, and speak the truth
Absolutely.
to power. No matter where you're at, no matter what room you're in, take up space and use your voice to speak on things that matter. And as always, we really appreciate you guys being here with us again this week, listening to us gab about all things religious trauma and deconstruction. If you like this show, please hit that subscribe button so you can catch us back here again next week and never miss an episode. And if you ever want an opportunity to be on the show, just shoot us an email at theawakeningpod@gmail.com. We would love to have you on and talk about deconstruction.
Thank you for being with us today, Adalyn. I was so privileged to get to meet you, and I'm so glad
Oh, me
now I got a new
too.
fangirl.
Thank you.
You got a new fangirl, groupie, and I followed you on Subtrack. But
Yeah,
for
I saw
everybody
that.
else,
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, it's just thank you for making sure that it doesn't matter where you're at in your journey. where
Yeah.
you've deconstructed began, and just know that it never ends. And
Yes,
wherever you line up,
and
there's
it doesn't
always people
matter.
along the
Yeah.
way to
And it
love
doesn't
you.
matter where you land. Again, you can land into, a deeper, more meaningful version of your faith. You can land in, Gnosticism. You can land in atheism. You can land in so many different places. But the beautiful part about deconstruction is it's your journey and you get to decide what
Yes,
path
That's
feels right
true.
for you. So thank you again.
can
I
we
love
give
you so
Oh,
Adalyn
stinking much.
the
yeah.
last word?
I
Adalyn,
I
go ahead.
will definitely, link your Substack for our listeners. That way, if you
Okay.
guys wanna check out her writings, she is an incredible writer. She does write, from the Christian perspective, but if that is where you're at on your journey, she is an incredible person to follow. So I'm gonna let Adeline give us the last word before we close out the show today.
I'm just thankful to finally be in a place where I can see God for how I feel like He is, and that's a loving God. And so if we can grasp that and not get caught up in the political fervor that's out there and the loyalty binds and the need for power, we'll be a lot better off for it, and our future
Yeah,
will be better off for it. And I know right now it might feel dark, and I know right now it might feel lonely, and it might feel like evil is winning. But if we believe that God is love, then that will win. And so we have to continue being ourselves and being a Nathan, no
and
matter what.
keep being love. That's literally what we gotta do is keep showing them how it's done. Thank you so much. Again, I love you, honey. It's been a
Love you
great show.
too. Thank y'all.
I'm
You
so
the
glad to be
best.
a groupie now. It was a pleasure meeting you.
If I drown, would you pull me back to you? Religion has many victims, and these are the stories of how they survived.
The preceding podcast is solely owned by the host or hosts and is distributed by Big Media LLC. Copyright 2026.